Welcome to Eating Enlightenment, the show that explores individual transformation stories around food, eating, body, mind, and healing. In particular, giving exploration towards the cognitive, the thoughts, the mental paradigms, the ability to reconnect with your body, the tools and strategies that work, and just having some fun along the way. I'm Jared, and long story short, I struggled with food. I was a wrestler. I became freaking miserable. I became a monk because I was so miserable. And up in the mountains, got some meditation goodness. And now I'm all about spreading the mindful vibe. And my role in this podcast is to simply explore, ask great questions, and stay in the present moment with my guest. Dr. White, who is such a helpful and wonderful conversationalist, but also in terms of giving specific, tangible advice for someone who's struggling with gut issues. The advice in this podcast is just so helpful. I learned a lot of stuff in this podcast, especially around food restrictions and how food restrictions, they aren't meant to be permanent. That was a big mind shift for me, and sometimes when I help people in my own private practice, this can be a major roadblock. So for me personally, I was just so glad to hear some of Dr. White's wisdom and practical strategies around food intolerances, food preferences, and really how to understand them. I think you're going to get a lot out of this episode, so without further ado. Okay, everyone, I'm here with Dr. WendyLeigh White, and I am going to start off by asking my usual question. Dr. WendyLeigh White, why are you passionate about eating, intuitive eating, tuning into people's bodies, all these different things? What draws you to this overall field?
So, a handful of reasons, but let's talk about the most important. I think first, I'm not a well person by default. I was a super sickly kid, teen, and young adult. And with my strong family history of diabetes and heart disease and cancers, I thought, I need to figure this out. I know inside, intuitively, I knew that there had to be a different way, because looking at my parents and grandparents and knowing all the things that I suffered with as a kid, I knew that I had to figure something out, or this was just going to be a hard, miserable life.
Hmm.
And so when I started looking into how can I help myself learn differently or do things differently, there were doctors that just said I was stressed. There was an allergist who laughed at me when I got under 100 pounds. I was wasting away, super sick. And she laughed and said, "Oh, you should publish your diet. Everybody wants to lose weight."
Oh.
And that was not helpful. I was, I don't know, 22 and wasting away. I couldn't open jars. I was under 100 pounds. I was getting migraines, all sorts of GI stuff. And the allergist thought it was funny, like, oh, everybody wants to lose weight. So I think family history, seeing what my parents and grandparents went through, and knowing that that I didn't want to suffer like that, for the rest of my life. And so here I am at 48. I am 2 years younger than my mom was when she had a quintuple bypass.
Hmm.
And I'm living proof that things can be done differently, that you can learn how to hear what your body needs and hear what your body's telling you. And that we as humans, we don't have to be perfect, but we can make choices every single day that make a difference.
I hear you. And with all the being ignored and you hear so much about weight stigma where people go in the doctor's office for their knee is hurting and the doctor tells them to lose weight. There's so
Lose
many
weight.
different stories like that. It's hard to imagine someone wanting to become a doctor, and obviously you're a doctor now, from your being ignored to actually being a doctor. Like, I don't know, why did you I guess, would you say that your passion and motivation to learn about health that overcame your negative experiences with the doctor?
Eventually, but here's the deal. I have a master's degree in food science with minors in chemistry and toxicology, and so I was in the food industry as my first career, and I was still pretty sick at that point and was miserable because here I was in the food industry with just add water cookies in a bag and ready to spread frosting. These were some of the product lines that I supported. And it was it was just so disturbing. Like, it was so wrong that I was helping push and design and push these products, these highly processed chemical products. Um, and it was only when I found a naturopathic doctor who introduced the idea that, I mean, I knew about nutrition and I knew about osteopathic medicine, which is kind of a hands on modality, but I didn't know naturopathic medicine existed. And when I met a naturopath, it was like fireworks went off.
Huh.
I came home from that meeting and was just babbling like crazy with my husband. We were pregnant with our first child at the time. I had quit my food science job because I didn't want to be bathing my baby in stress hormones, and I was so unhappy working there.
Mm.
And during my pregnancy, I was like, I'm going to soul search. I'm going to find, like, here I am with a graduate degree and the student loans to go with it. And I'm miserable. Like, what am I going to do? So when I came home from meeting with the naturopath, I just was like, and my husband and I agreed. Clearly, I found what I was meant to do.
What, like, so wow, that's awesome. I mean, fireworks and
I mean,
everything.
it was so clear. Like, there it was.
So you
I
not only went to the naturopath and said, one, this is gonna like really help solve my problems, but two, this is like what I want to do.
Yeah.
I mean, that would explain the fireworks.
Yeah. It was just like, I never knew it existed. And, going back to that tune in idea, every cell of my body was like, this is who you are. You just didn't know it yet. Like I got goosebumps.
Mm,
Like, this is not a choice of mine. This is who I am.
mm,
The idea that I can help people living in this crazy mainstream world know that there's a different way.
mm,
Know that they can trust themselves, know
mhm.
that they can learn how to hear what their inner guidance is telling them. Like, what does this world need more than that?
Yeah,
I
and if
I don't have, I don't know. Um yeah, and so it all, and of course at that point I was pregnant. We lived in Minnesota. There are no naturopathic schools in the center of the country. So we knew we were going to have to relocate, wait until my baby got old enough that I felt like I could leave her to go back to naturopathic school, which,
mm,
it's medical school. It's not super easy. So we had to do a lot of life prioritizations to get there. And we did. My daughter was 3 to 8 when I was in naturopathic school. My husband is the most supportive person ever.
great.
And we did it. Like, I don't,
Woo!
we were both just about empty by the time I graduated, but we did.
Oh my gosh, I love hearing that story. And if you're listening to the podcast, you mentioned Tune In, which is your radio show, and that was I guess that was about tuning in, and that was this
Yeah,
lights you up. I mean, it's so cool to
yeah,
hear that like your body responds with like
yeah.
goosebumps, and I think
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
such a good sign.
I think the idea of tuning into your body, we ignore our body so much. Even like as a kid, when we say things like, that person makes me feel funny in my tummy,
Hmm.
or, oh, this place feels weird. Like, we dismiss that when kids say that. And I'm suggesting because of that, we really stopped listening to our internal cues. And, people will say, oh, that food doesn't make me feel good. And I'll say, well, how often do you eat it? Oh, probably about 4 times a week. I'm like, why aren't you listening to the cues that your body's giving you?
Mm,
So the idea of tune into your body is that we have this ability to know what we need, to hear what our body's telling us, and to respond appropriately. But so often, our culture has really shut that down from early on.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just a matter of when we begin listening,
Mm-hmm.
we can learn all sorts of things about what our bodies need. And
Mm.
then, there's the listening, and then there's the responding respectfully, right? And not ignoring. And that's practice. When I ask people questions about themselves, quite often they're like, "Oh, I don't know." And
Mm.
so I put on their care plan, pay attention to X, Y, or Z and describe it to me later, because often we're just not practiced in paying attention.
Mhm.
Um,
Like
a
how foods
good,
make you feel, as
yeah,
an
a
example,
good
something like
practice
this.
is like, how is your digestion? And people often are so disconnected from their guts.
Mm.
They're like, fine. And when they really start paying attention, they realize, oh, I get really uncomfortable after I eat whatever. Or, oh, when I eat this, I feel fabulous.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes connecting to the gut has too much emotional charge. And so I'll
Sure.
say, hey, let's check in with your right knee. You feel your right knee in this moment. Can you feel it against your pants? Can you feel
Okay.
the air? Because the right knee doesn't have the
Yeah.
emotional charge that like the gut does,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. Belly and
Um,
all that stuff.
and we just maybe start at the right knee, like, hey, how's your right knee today? No pain, no discomfort, just awareness. And
Wow.
then we can practice with other parts of the body.
Wow. I like that. So if someone checks into their right knee, I mean, what would they discover? Like if they had a good food, or versus like some if they had a food that resonated with them, versus a food that didn't resonate, how would
Totally
that
not
impact their
connected.
right knee?
Totally not connected to food.
I
This is
see.
just about helping them to practice being present in their bodies.
Ah,
If they can practice with something neutral like the knee,
I see.
then when they feel more comfortable being part of their body and checking in with their left ankle and their right elbow, then when they're practiced, like, okay, I can be in
Mm,
my body now. Oh,
mm,
how does that make my chest feel? Do I feel emotions in my chest? Do I feel emotions in my belly?
mhm,
What information can I get from the foods I'm eating, how they're
mhm.
working with me, how they're not?
Yeah.
I had a patient in this last week, and it was just a care plan follow up, so a return visit. And she said, these probiotics are really good for me.
Mm,
And I was like, fab. And she was super excited about it. I was like, fabulous. Tell me how you know that. And often I'll hear because my bowel movements have regulated, or, I'll hear tangible physical stuff. And I was so proud of her. She said, I can feel a shift in my mood
mm,
about a half hour after I take them.
mm.
I intuitively know that they are good
Yes.
for me. And I was like, fabulous. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for people to be able to sense that intuition, that, like, I don't know, there's a gut feel. Sometimes it physically is in the belly, and other times it's just kind of an overall sense.
I love it. This connecting to your body and feeling everything, it's been such an integral part of my own journey, getting out of my head and into my body. Is this I have a hard time imagining that this skill of tuning in is taught in med school. I mean, maybe it is, but when I think of med school, I think of, medications and so forth, and so is this something that you learned at school, or is
A
this,
little bit of
a
both.
little bit about.
And Jared, this is why I went to naturopathic medical school as opposed to conventional medical school. So that there is that mind, body, spirit in addition
Interesting.
to physical. And so, there were naturopathic counseling classes,
Mm,
and there is a discussion that
I see.
the neurotransmitters of your mood are connected with your digestive tract, and that there is a connection, that there were
Mm,
like one big spider web. um,
that's
so
awesome.
part of it the foundations
I
came
see.
from school, but really the tune into your body idea. I did some somatic meditation practices with a Buddhist organization for years, and that somatic meditation really supports my idea that we're brilliant creatures, and that when we can tune in, we can learn all sorts of stuff just from inside. I don't have to go outside to seek what's the best vitamin D supplement for me. I can kind of check in with them and get a gut feel. And for those listening and not watching a video, I'm putting like gut feel in air quotes. Um, I can get a gut feel of what is best for me. And, this isn't a perfect, it's not a perfect inner guidance. Sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I can't hear that inner knowing. But I know it's there. It just sometimes gets clouded or muddled.
Sure.
Life gets in the way.
Yeah, no, and it can be super hard to. I mean, I wonder how long you think it takes for people to learn how to connect to their body, because I think it can be tough. If someone has spent decades in their head, right? Then like feeling their body is can be, you know, you check in and you just don't feel anything. I guess you can,
Absolutely.
you know,
Absolutely. And that's why we talk about the fact that it's in us. We had it as kids. So we're not
mm,
learning anything. What we're trying to do is uncover the layers to allow what's already there
interesting.
to be heard. And you're absolutely right.
Hmm,
Decades of being in our heads, and not only being in our heads out of our bodies, but really trying to ignore our bodies, right?
yeah.
Because for so many years, we were told that like again, going back to that kid example of like, this place feels icky or that person makes me feel uncomfortable in my belly.
Hmm.
We're told to shut it down and ignore it.
Yeah.
And so it's not only about, overthinking and disconnecting, but it's also, we've just been
Mm,
ignoring these signals.
hmm.
And it's fun. I like the discovery process because patients will say, like, this is nearly impossible. I can't hear
Mm,
anything, I can't feel anything.
mm,
But once it begins,
mm,
super fun because it's something simple like, I want you to open your refrigerator door
hmm,
in a ground, like take a few deep breaths so that you're not in this frazzled state. Open your refrigerator door that, is fairly stocked because you just went grocery shopping, and really just ask yourself, what do I want right now? And that can be really overwhelming.
yeah.
But the first moment that you get a clear hit of something seems brighter and you
Mm,
reach for that, or a word pops in your head and you reach for that, like those are the little ways
interesting.
that are just so cool that when they start happening,
Mm,
you can start hearing them or being aware of them. Then you realize, oh, I can do this.
interesting.
And then you start playing with it. And then it
I
just gets fun.
I liked those, how you mentioned like something looked brighter or there was like a word or an image in your head, like showing that there's different ways to connect to like your preferences, we'll say. Your intuition is sure it's in your belly and your knee in your knees or
Yeah.
or wherever. It's in your body, right? But it's also, maybe like a color that kind of stands out or
Mhm.
I think that's awesome to hear
Yeah.
about that.
And you can imagine that if we're in our normal go, 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 kind of disconnected from ourselves state,
Hmm.
if we were to open the fridge door and be like, oh, what do I want? We're not quiet enough to actually expect or hear an answer. And so there's different ways, you have to be quiet enough to be able to pay attention to what your body's saying.
Hmm.
If it's used to
Mm,
being shut down for decades,
mhm.
most likely when it begins to wake up and begins to give you signals, most likely it's not going to be like screaming. Most likely it's going to be kind of like, well, are you really asking? I think the broccoli. And so we have to be a little bit quiet in the beginning, practicing meditation, mindfulness, deep breathing to allow the subtleness to come through. It's not always that subtle, but in the beginning, especially so, because it's like, are you just going to shut me down again? I'm going
Mm,
to be a little tentative here.
yeah,
So the more quiet we
definitely,
can be
definitely.
through prayer, meditation, breathing, whatever that might be.
journaling. I'm the journaling guy. I always recommend people journal, try to journal their stuff because, for me, it was such an important thing because when you're first trying to feel into the body, it's all sort of like a fog, I'll say, right? But
Mhm.
like kind of like putting stuff on paper, you can kind of get a little like tangible step forward. Okay, I think I'm feeling this, getting it on paper. I think that's
Yeah,
such
I love that. So my daughter's now 21. She hates when I share stories about her.
a
She has heard the phrase better out than in her entire life.
Oh, I see.
If you
Emotions.
have a bellyache and you're afraid you're going to vomit, it's
Mm,
okay. If you have to vomit, let it out. Better out
mm,
than in, or, emotions or things of that nature.
mm.
So has always joked that she's going to get it tattooed on her forehead. But I believe that journaling is a perfect way to get things out. We don't
Uh-huh.
want to stuff things down and trap them in. We want them to be processed and worked through.
Yes, yes, I love it. And so on your own healing journey, you get exposed to these things and you have migraines, you're going through some GI issues.
Yeah.
Like what I know these things are kind of hard to think back and all the changes you made, but like you start listening to your body. Did you start sleeping better? Did you start like eating different foods? And if so, which ones? Like
Mhm.
how did your healing journey kind of progress as you tuned
Yeah.
in?
So, yeah. So, I mean, it's been, gosh, I feel so old. It's funny. It's been 25 plus years at
Mm,
this point, right?
mhm.
And part of that was in naturopathic school, super difficult to attend to my needs in
Yeah,
medical school.
yeah,
And I think it's been really just gradual explorations
yes.
of food, movement, chemical exposure. Um, I
Chemical
wanted
exposure?
chemical exposure, like minimizing my exposure to artificial scents and things of that nature, because I found that they irritate me enough that they can trigger a
I
migraine.
see. I see.
Um, it's just, I kind of talk about the five things. I don't have a fancy name for them yet.
The 5 things. I
Five
like it.
things, like essentials
I
or
like it, I like it, I like it.
yeah,
Yes,
five
yes,
things.
perfect, perfect.
Balance is really addressing the nervous system. And so that is helping, instead of being in sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight, stress, threat mode, finding ways that soothe your body into parasympathetic and provide safety. That can
Mm,
be all the things we just talked about: prayer, meditation, journaling, breathing, mindfulness, getting enough sleep,
mm,
controlling your environment so you feel safe. So that's balance the nervous system. Move is physically moving the body. I know for me, I can over exercise and
mm,
have it be a stressor to my system.
mhm,
And so for me, more gentle exercise is what works for me. And I learned this just through living, right?
mm,
I learned that, oh, if I do a really high intensity workout, I might feel great in it,
mm.
but then quite often, almost always, I would either get a migraine or sleep for like a 3-hour nap afterwards. Like it
Ah,
just took too much out of me. So, but that was just trial and error.
mm,
Had I found the trainer that I love now,
mm.
I would have learned that way earlier, but I didn't. It was this culture of work harder, rip, shred, sculpt.
Just
And that
do it.
was horrible for me. Like
Yeah,
that beat me down.
yeah.
So there's balance, move, nourish. That's where food, hydration, and supplementation come. So often people are given therapeutic diets, whether it's because of food sensitivity testing or minimally fermentable foods or whatever therapeutic diet they're on. Typically, they're given that diet and said, "This is what's going to fix you."
Yes.
And my approach to a therapeutic diet is you might need to eat a certain way for a while your body heals. And that's the caveat.
Mm,
Therapeutic diets are not meant to be forever.
mm.
They're meant to be minimizing fermentable fibers or minimizing irritants as your body heals. And then you reintroduce and you see how much healing has happened and where you can go from there.
Yeah.
And so I've done a lot, not just of therapeutic diets, which are often quite restrictive, but I've done a lot of healing of the
Hmm.
digestive tract. And I think that's a
Interesting.
component that's missing in a lot of nutrition and naturopathic therapies.
I love what you're saying here, because I run into this a lot where someone has said they're allergic or various foods don't make them feel well, but then they end up with this highly restrictive diet, which to me, sounds like a diet, right?
Yeah,
Diet in
and is
disguise, right?
anxiety provoking, and how can you feel, so back to that nervous system state, I want people to be in that safety parasympathetic nervous system because that's where physiologically the body can digest, absorb, detoxify, and eliminate. And if someone has so much anxiety around what they're eating, they're in sympathetic, that right there is going to impact the health of their digestive tract.
If
Yes.
you're listening to this podcast, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, can you just explain those like real quickly? Because they're kind
Yeah.
of long, fancy words, you
Yes.
know?
So the sympathetic nervous system is that the tiger's in the corner of the room
Mm,
and our body is freaked out and wants to fight it or run. And so all of the energy of our body goes into our muscles and our brain. So we can either fight or run or
mm,
think.
mhm,
And if we're about to be eaten by a tiger, the body does not care if we're going to digest lunch.
mhm,
So it really shuts down everything that happens in our core.
mm,
The only time our core functions, our digestion and our immune system, and our reproduction to some extent, depending on gender, the only time those immune, digestion, and reproduction get attended to is when we feel safe, when
yes.
our body is in that parasympathetic nervous system, that rest and digest safe mode.
Mm,
And so, if we have a lot of anger and anxiety and um, stress, more of that sympathetic nervous system, tigers in the corner of the room, we're less likely to be able to open to receive the nourishment from the incoming food.
yes. Yeah.
And that's how I really started getting into non diet, weight neutral medicine. I had been in practice, I
Mm,
don't know, somewhere in the 5 to 8 year time frame when I really, in more of like a mainstream naturopathic way, lots of therapeutic diets, etc. And it was just in the last, I don't know, yeah, 8 to 10 years, I guess,
mm,
um, that I realized so many patients were coming to me. They were so stressed out. They feel like
yeah.
they couldn't eat anything.
Yeah.
And they had so much anxiety about everything they put into their mouths.
Mm,
That baseline anxiety was probably creating symptoms more than the actual food itself.
yeah. Yeah. I
And,
hear you
and
so
that's,
much on this.
yes, and so many people have, they see a doctor, an allergist, a nutritionist. So by the time they come to see me, they've got this test result from 10 years ago and this one from 8 and
Yes.
this one
Yeah.
from 6, and they're all different, but they're still trying to be restrictive in respect to all of them. And there's
Yes.
nothing left that they quote can eat.
Yeah.
And that's infuriating to me.
Ah,
That they've had no discussion about the fact that their bodies are brilliant and their bodies can heal.
mm,
There's been no support of that healing.
mm,
And they have all this anxiety and they don't know how to nourish themselves. And I love the word nourish.
mm.
It's like one of those like touchy feely, almost like a teddy bear word, right? Like I want everyone to really feel nourished, fed on all levels.
I feel like a plant when I see that. When I
Yeah.
think of like a plant, a plant that's like that. If you're listening to the podcast, you can't see, but Dr. WendyLeigh White has a plant behind her, and it's a nourished plant. It's growing nice and tall. The leaves are, alive, and they're not, you know,
They're not crinkled up.
yeah, they're not crinkled and shriveled and leaning over, and it's supported by a nice foundation of soil, and there's light. Um, that's when we're nourished, we're resting, we're getting enough food,
Yeah.
and I love hearing this message too, that the the allergies aren't permanent, and essentially
Yeah.
might have some struggles, but
Yeah.
you can heal from them.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, so many times we think allergies are permanent. I mean, I used to have way more allergies. I mean, I used to get sick way more often as well.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, and let's differentiate between allergies and sensitivities or intolerances.
sure.
So, allergies are mediated by one part of the immune system, IgE, think E for emergency. Those are like anaphylaxis to peanuts to strawberries, full body
Mm,
reactions. That's really where mainstream allergists and MDs address.
I see.
Then there's the intolerance or sensitivity, often mediated by IgG, think G for general as opposed to E for emergency. Yeah, and so that's the IgG, that's the IgE. E for emergency is like the true food allergies. And that's really what mainstream acknowledges. Then there's the sensitivities and intolerances. And that's often mediated by IgG, think G for general instead of E for emergency. And these general insensitivities or tolerances can be hours to days long in reaction. Unlike the true allergies that are like emergencies, usually it's minutes to hours. Like you eat something and within minutes you've got hives or something of that nature.
Mm,
Sensitivities or intolerances tend to be hours to days. So I could eat something today and have a headache tonight or tomorrow morning that could be triggered by what I ate, but it's longer, so it's often harder to really pinpoint.
interesting.
And if you have a true food allergy, IgE, you most likely will have it for your life.
Mm,
There are some therapies that claim otherwise, but in general, most people agree that you'll have an allergy for your life. Sensitivities and intolerances can change.
mm,
And so, as we encourage the body to heal, and the body is less raw, less reactive, more balanced, most often, many of them, the sensitivities go away.
yeah.
Some who that are very strong might linger, but the difference would be if you could eat, let's say, wheat 3 times a day, and it would make you incredibly sick before you did any healing. You might get to the point where, all right, I can't eat wheat every day because I'm still that sensitive to it, but maybe I can eat it a couple times a week and it's okay because I've built up my resistance or my resiliency and my resistance to the irritant. And so sometimes people can really just fully introduce the foods that they used to be sensitive to.
Mhm.
And other times they're still sensitive, but much less so. So usually they can increase the frequency or quantity and still be okay, but they know that if they cross a certain threshold of frequency or quantity that they'll start feeling their symptoms.
And and so to get back, so if I'm understanding you correctly, it sounds like if someone one gets a lot more rest and relaxation, they're not in the sympathetic, they're in the parasympathetic nervous system. They're a lot more balanced. They're getting sleep and all that. They're also, you mentioned movement. They're moving in a good way that feels right to them. They're nourishing themselves with food.
Yep.
Um, they'll sort of be able to return to a return to some state where the not the allergies, but the sensitivities will decrease.
Yes.
And you mentioned someone might have, you know, they might be initially on a therapeutic diet where,
Mhm.
you know, if they're sensitive to, well, I guess gluten is probably the most common one or whatever, but if they're sensitive to something,
Yeah.
maybe in the beginning they're not eating that, but as they, okay,
Yes. Yes. And the way I explain it is let's give our bodies about 6 weeks, about, to really minimize all irritants that we know of. And in that time, we bring on um, different things for the digestive tract. I often equate it to like when you have a cut on your hand, you want to apply salve to help soothe it and keep it moist and protect it. Well, we have powders and potions that do the same thing for the digestive tract. And so while we're minimizing known irritants, we're also really focusing on applying salve to the inside of the
oh,
digestive
nice.
tract, giving the cells of the digestive tract their favorite food so that they'll turn over as quickly as possible. We're encouraging good bacteria to be introduced either through
Mm,
food or supplements or both,
mm,
so that the bad bacteria die off and the good bacteria take hold and help trigger what they need to in the immune system.
mm, mm,
And then when we feel as though all symptoms have normalized, no heartburn, no gas, no bloating, regular stools, no straining, no foul fermented
mm,
putrid odors. When things feel like they're running in a way that is healthy,
mhm,
then we'll say, okay, like let's start playing
mm,
from a space of curiosity,
mm,
not anxiety,
mm,
not being too attached to the outcome. From a place of curiosity, start exploring reintroducing all the foods that were identified as irritants,
mm,
and see how you feel with them. Most likely you're going to be able to just reintroduce them and you're great. Sometimes there are going to be a few key foods that are just irritating for you, and like that's a bummer. Like it's no fun to feel like, oh well, when I eat that I don't feel great. But that's the reality. Like we're human, we're
yeah,
animals. There are things that don't agree with us.
yeah,
And on one hand, you could say, you could have a very negative feeling about it of, oh, I can't eat that. And oh, I really want it, but I can't. Like that's stressful. Or you can say, you know what? I absolutely have the power. I can choose to eat that. And if I do, I know I won't feel super well. And sometimes I'm gonna make that choice
mm,
because I'm gonna be at grandma's house and
yeah,
she
yeah,
made homemade lasagna and I'm gonna do it. And there's no guilt and shame in that. It's a
mhm,
decision.
mhm,
And so that's the place I like to help people get to is I have the power to choose anything I want to eat.
mm,
Some things are gonna make me feel better than others. Some days I'm gonna feel grounded and centered and
mm,
able to choose what's gonna make me feel well.
mm,
Other days, for social reasons or emotional reasons or whatever, I'm going to choose something that isn't the best. That's perfectly okay.
yeah. Um, and I know like your practice often will probably focus a lot on like the salves and the potions, so to speak, on healing and the good gut bacteria. I'm wondering if you can give us like a few tips on that. What comes to mind, you mentioned probiotics earlier. I'm thinking like yogurt or something like Greek yogurt or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah. So I like food based recommendations, especially if someone's not working with a practitioner. Rarely will I recommend a supplement when they're not working with a practitioner because there's so many interactions and there's so many cheap supplements that are in terribly absorbable forms that really don't do you much good and all of that. So, from the food perspective, one of the things that I talked about giving the mucosal cells, the cells of your digestive tract lining, their favorite food so they turn over as quickly as possible. Glutamine is the amino acid that's their favorite food.
Hmm.
Well, one of the foods that's highest in glutamine is cabbage.
Ah.
So if you Google healing cabbage soup, you'll probably find a bunch of recipes that are very high in cabbage, therefore high in glutamine, and they're super healing for the
Oh
digestive
my gosh.
tract. Now, many people will say, oh, but cabbage gives me gas. Then we have to look at, well, maybe you're so stressed out that your stomach acid is low and you can't
Uh,
digest it well. And I mean,
uh, sure,
everything's
sure.
not super straightforward, but that is a really easy way to get glutamine in your diet
Mm,
so that your mucosal cells, your digestive tract, will turn over as quickly as possible and heal faster.
mm,
Sources of probiotics would be sauerkraut, kimchi, in addition to yogurt.
mm.
Not everyone tolerates dairy super
Yeah,
well, so I
yeah.
like the sauerkraut and the kimchi options. Um,
Mm.
yeah, and I think,
Thank you. This
yeah,
is yeah, yeah.
overall, there's so much we can approach with curiosity. Trusting ourselves, trusting that we're brilliant beings,
Mm,
and that it doesn't have to be hard, complicated, torturous. Baby
mm,
step by baby step, tuning into, can I hear how my body is telling me to live.
Mm.
Like the fact that I learned that heavy
Amen.
exercise wasn't great for me.
Amen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's I didn't get taught that by an external provider.
Hmm.
I learned that through my own experience of paying attention to how I respond to certain things. And I always tell my patients and clients that whether we're recommending lifestyle, sleep, movement, or food, I'm recommending it based on my education and my experience. It's only the place to start. What's going to guide us for next steps is going to be their body's response.
Mm. I love this.
That's
And speaking, I think um, do you have recipes on your website? I think you do.
I do. There's
Like, do you
a
have the healing cabbage soup up there?
I don't know if the healing cabbage soup is in there. I have a kitchen healing ebook that pops up
Yeah.
because I want people to know that this doesn't have to be complicated. And so that ebook is about if you have a sore throat or a splinter, how you can go to your kitchen, not even your herbal cabinet, because not everybody carries herbs, but like even some of the herbs and spices that you use for cooking can be used medicinally.
Mm.
And so, yeah, that ebook that pops up on my website is just about like go to your kitchen when you have a sore throat. You'd be surprised how many things are just in your normal mainstream American kitchen
Mm.
that can help support healing.
And if people wanted to find you online, get those your ebook on these spices that can support their gut health, where can people find you online?
Yeah, so my website is drwendyleighwhite.com, and Lee is spelled Leigh. And so you can do that.
drwendyleighwhite.com.
Yes.
Yes, and there will be links down below in the show notes if you're listening. Um,
And of course, I'm on social media everywhere, but you can get there through my website.
sure. And are your social media handles the same?
Yep,
Okay,
Dr. Wendy Lee White.
got you. I really love your passion for this, and I really taken away a lot of good stuff about how you can heal from out from sensitivities and then reintroduce foods. It's an incredibly inspiring message.
Yeah.
Really paradigm shifting, changing because I mean,
I want
yeah.
people to know that they're brilliant,
Hmm.
that their bodies can heal,
Mm.
can rebalance, can guide them. I want them to know that they can trust their internal abilities and
Mm.
not have to feel like they need to rely on external things to swoop in and do the work.
Yeah.
We're brilliant. We can do our work. And I'm not against external things that swoop in. If I'm in a car accident, I want all those external things to
Sure.
swoop in
Sure.
and put me back together.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we're brilliant beings, and I want more people to know that.
And then final question. You may have already answered it, but what is your definition of enlightenment?
Tuning in to the brilliance within.
Mm, I like it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Wendy Lee Light.
Thank
I really
you.
appreciated it.
This was
Okay.
fabulous. Thank you.
All right, namaste, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. It really does mean the world to me. And be sure to check out the Eating Enlightenment journaling app on iTunes and iOS. It's also available on my website at eatingenlightenment.com. But try it out. Download the app, start today, because it's pretty simple and quick to get the hang of this really simple guideline. Journal before you eat, journal with awareness before you eat, write out your thoughts and feelings in the app before you eat. Do that. You will see results right away. You will start rethinking and changing your eating decisions. You won't binge as much if you write stuff down. It's that simple. I want you to try it for yourself. I want you to go to the iOS store right now while it's fresh on your mind. While it's fresh on your mind, go to the iOS store right now, download the Eating Enlightenment app or Android, or go to eatingenlightenment.com. It's right on the front page. Download the app. Give it a shot before your next meal. You can start today. You can literally start writing your thoughts and feelings out on paper getting those neural connections established from your feeling body to your mind, you can start building those neural pathways, which are going to help you change your eating habits in a really practical way. You'll see changes right away. You will realize that the unhealthy food right in front of you is, you don't even want it. You realize, why am I even going towards it? Why am I grabbing towards it? You'll put it away. You'll move on with your day. You'll be more present with others because you got those thoughts out of your head. Even if they're crazy thoughts, you got them out of your head onto paper, and now you can be more present with people because your mind is more free. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm going on a ramble, but the point is, if you struggle with food, and let's be honest here, some of you listening do, that's okay. If you're a creative person, you like expressing yourself via the written word, right? This journaling thing isn't for everyone, but if you struggle with food and you're a creative person on one side, or you're highly organized, extremely hard worker, and logical on the other side, the journal is meant for those folks, and those folks love the journal. Highly organized people are able to finally struggle to get their feelings out on paper, but writing is something that they can do. It's natural to them. And then the organized person who's maybe more chaotic is actually able to put structure to their thoughts and feelings around food. It's just a amazing practice that can honestly change your life. That will change your life. The more you commit to this, the more you understand this. So, you know what to do, and stay tuned for the next episode coming up.